Captain Samuel Reed did not pack a survival knife. He had been deployed 4 times. He had completed SEER school. He had spent 11 weeks in environments where the wrong decision meant a body bag. And when he packed his personal kit, the one he trusted with his life, he reached past the blade and picked up a sewing kit and a roll of black electrical tape. Raccoon Survival has spent 20 years studying what the professionals actually carry. It is never what you see in the movies. There is a survival industry in this country worth over $4 billion a year. $4 billion. That money buys titanium fire starters and carbon fiber shelters and tactical flashlights with 17 modes and a strobe function designed to disorient an attacker at close range. The packaging always says the same thing. Military grade. Mil-Spec. Trusted by operators worldwide. Walk into any outdoor retailer and the message is clear. Survival is expensive. Preparation costs money. The more you spend, the safer you become. And somewhere between the $300 knife and the $500 bug-out bag is the implication that if you cannot afford this, you are not ready. You are vulnerable. You are behind. That is a lie. Not a small lie. Not a marketing exaggeration. A structural, deliberate, carefully maintained lie that the survival industry depends on. Because the moment you understand what the actual United States military spends on individual survival components, the entire civilian market becomes transparent. And what is transparent is not pretty. Raccoon Survival started pulling procurement records 7 years ago. Not the classified ones, the public ones. The ones filed through the Defense Logistics Agency, tracked by national stock numbers, available to anyone with patience and a Freedom of Information request. The numbers are not dramatic, they are not cinematic, they are ordinary, and that is the point. The items that appear most frequently on bulk survival procurement lists cost less than $5 each. Some cost less than $2. The most expensive item on the list, Raccoon Survival Compiled, costs $4.60 at retail. Not wholesale, retail, Walmart retail. 11 items, total cost under $50. Every single one selected by people whose job is to not die in places where dying is the default outcome. This is the list, not a guess, not an opinion, not a recommendation from someone who watched a YouTube video about bushcraft. This is what the procurement records show. But before the list, something needs to be understood about how military survival procurement works. Because without that context, the list makes no sense. A sewing kit makes no sense. Electrical tape makes no sense. The cheapest items on Earth making it onto a military procurement list makes no sense. Until you understand the one metric that governs every decision. 0 failure rate. That is the requirement. Not low failure rate. Not acceptable failure rate. 0. The item must work every single time, in every condition, with no maintenance, no training, and no second chances. If it fails once in 10,000 uses, it does not make the list. If it requires a battery, it has a failure mode. If it requires calibration, it has a failure mode. If it has moving parts, it has a failure mode. The civilian market optimizes for the opposite. Features, complexity, the appearance of capability. A knife with 14 tools built into the handle feels like preparation. It feels like readiness. What it actually is 14 failure points in the space of 6 inches. Sergeant First Class Diana Morales spent 16 years in the Army, the last 8 attached to units whose names do not appear on public rosters. She told Raccoon Survival something that reframed the entire investigation. She said that in her experience, the soldiers who carried the most gear were the ones who trusted their gear the least. The ones who carried almost nothing were the ones who had been in the field long enough to know what actually mattered. And what actually mattered fit in a sandwich bag. A sandwich bag. 16 years of operational experience condensed into a Ziploc bag that weighed less than a pound. That conversation happened in a parking lot outside a hardware store in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in March of 2022. She was buying electrical tape. 3 rolls. Raccoon Survival asked her why 3. She said 1 is for her kit, 1 is for her truck, 1 is for the house. Because electrical tape does not expire, does not break, does not require instructions, and does 100 things that tools costing 50 times as much cannot do. That brings us to the first item on the list. Electrical tape. Not duct tape, not gaffer tape, not paracord or zip ties, or the tactical adhesive strips sold in blister packs for $12 at outdoor retailers. Black vinyl electrical tape. 60 cents a roll at Walmart. National stock number 5970-00-281-1742. The reason it appears on procurement lists for survival kits and not duct tape is straightforward. Duct tape loses adhesion in extreme cold. Below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, the adhesive becomes brittle. In high heat, it melts and leaves residue that attracts insects and contaminates wounds. It is also bulky. A standard roll of duct tape weighs 11 ounces. A standard roll of electrical tape weighs 1.2. What electrical tape does in a survival context is longer than most people expect. It seals wound dressings. It repairs torn clothing at seams where stitching is impractical. It marks trails in low visibility. It secures splints. It insulates improvised electrical connections. It bundles gear. It waterproofs matches. It repairs torn plastic sheeting. It provides a grip surface on wet tools. It seals the seams of improvised shelters. Staff Sergeant Luis Delgado used it to close a 4-inch laceration on his forearm in 2018 during a training exercise in the Cascade Range when his medical kit was 60 meters uphill in a pack that had slid off a ledge. He wrapped the wound in a strip of his undershirt and sealed it with 6 inches of electrical tape. That repair held for 9 hours. The medic who finally treated him said the tape had kept the wound cleaner than most field dressings would have. 60 cents. The second item appeared on every single procurement list Raccoon Survival reviewed. Every one. More consistently than water purification. More consistently than fire starters. More consistently than any item that the civilian market would consider essential. A sewing kit. Not a field repair kit with specialized needles and trauma thread. A basic civilian sewing kit. The kind sold at dollar stores. 2 needles, 3 colors of thread, 2 buttons, a small pair of folding scissors. National stock number 8315-00-268-9440. Captain Reed's selection starts to make sense now, but the reason is not what most people assume. The sewing kit is not on the list primarily for clothing repair, though it does that. It is on the list because a needle and thread solve a category of problems that no other tool addresses. In a survival scenario, the distinction between a functioning piece of equipment and a non-functioning piece of equipment is often a single point of failure. A torn seam on a pack, a separated sole on a boot, a ripped mosquito net, a detached strap. Every one of these failures in the civilian market would be addressed by replacing the item. In the field, there is no replacement. There is only repair. And the most reliable repair method for flexible materials known to engineering is the same one used for 5,000 years. A needle, a thread, and a running stitch. Specialist Karen Ostrovsky was attached to a forward operating base in a mountain region in 2015. Night temperatures dropped below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Her sleeping bag developed a 12-inch tear along the zipper seam during transit. No replacement was available. Resupply was 9 days away. She sewed the tear closed in 20 minutes using thread from a dollar store sewing kit. 9 nights at 15 below. The repair held. $1.12. The third item challenges everything the civilian survival market tells you about water purification. The market says you need a pump filter with a ceramic element, or a UV sterilization pen, or purification tablets that cost $8 for a pack of 20. The military procurement list says otherwise. Unscented household bleach, sodium hypochlorite, 8.25% concentration, available at every grocery store in the country. 67 cents for a 32-ounce bottle. That bottle will purify approximately 1,000 gallons of water. 1,000 gallons for 67 cents. The ratio is 8 drops per gallon of clear water, 16 drops per gallon of cloudy water. Wait 30 minutes. If the water does not have a slight chlorine smell, repeat the dose and wait another 15 minutes. This is not a survival hack. This is EPA recommended standard procedure. It is printed on FEMA emergency preparedness guides. It is the same method used by humanitarian organizations in disaster zones worldwide. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb was a water purification specialist for 6 years. He told Raccoon Survival that in his entire career, he never once used a pump filter in an actual field emergency. Every single time, it was bleach or calcium hypochlorite powder. Because filters clog, filters break, filters require replacement cartridges that weigh more than a bottle of bleach. The bleach does not care about sediment. It does not care about temperature. It does not have moving parts. It does one thing, and it does it every time. The civilian response to this information is predictable. Bleach does not feel like survival gear. It feels like laundry day. There is no way to put unscented bleach in a $500 kit and charge $500 for it. So the market pretends it does not exist. Raccoon Survival pulled the NSN, National Stock Number 6810-01-374-2153. Bulk procurement, thousands of units, distributed to field kits across every branch. 67 cents. The fourth item is where the investigation took a turn. Because this item does not appear on any civilian survival list Raccoon Survival has ever seen. Not one. It is not sold in the survival section of any retailer. It is not mentioned in any of the major prepper publications. It is invisible. Heavy-duty aluminum foil, not the lightweight kitchen foil, the heavy-duty version. 50 square feet for $1.89. And the list of applications in a survival context is so long that Raccoon Survival had to verify it with 3 separate military sources before including it. Signaling. A sheet of aluminium foil reflects sunlight farther than any signal mirror under $5. It does not require aiming. It does not require clear skies. Any ambient light bounces off the surface at sufficient intensity to be visible at distances over a mile. Cooking. Foil wrapped around food and placed on coals is the most reliable field cooking method that requires no cookware. No pot, no pan, no weight. Fold, seal, place, wait. Staff Sergeant Angela Rivas cooked meals for her entire team for 4 days using nothing but foil and a fire pit during an exercise in 2019 when their stove fuel was contaminated. 4 days, 6 people, a roll of foil and whatever they could forage. Water collection. A sheet of foil shaped into a shallow basin collects dew overnight. Not enough to hydrate, but enough to supplement. In arid environments, that supplement is the margin. Insulation. Foil reflects body heat. Wrapped around the feet inside boots, it reduces heat loss through the soles by up to 40%. This is not a camping trick. This is documented in cold weather field manuals published by the Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. Report number T04-06, published in 2004. Foil foot wraps. And the one nobody talks about, Faraday shielding. A phone wrapped in 3 layers of heavy-duty aluminium foil becomes untrackable. No GPS signal, no cellular signal, no Bluetooth. This does not appear on the procurement list for obvious reasons, but 3 separate sources confirmed it is standard practice in certain operational contexts. $1.89, invisible to the civilian market. The 5th item returned the investigation to familiar territory, but with a detail that changed its meaning entirely. A bandana. Cotton. 22 inches by 22 inches. Available in every color. 75 cents to $1.50, depending on the retailer. NSN 8460-00-823-7581. Every survival list mentions bandanas. This is not new. What is new is the specific way they appear on military procurement lists. They are listed not as bandanas, but as multi-use textile platforms, and they are procured in quantities that suggest a specific doctrinal role. 23 documented uses in the field manual cross-reference. Pre-filter for water purification. Removing large sediment before chemical treatment. Tourniquet. Sling for an injured arm. Dust mask in particle-heavy environments. Sweatband to keep perspiration out of the eyes during precision tasks. Pot holder. Signal flag. Bandage compression wrap. Eye cover for sleep in bright environments. Neck protection against sunburn. Head covering against heat stroke. Collection pouch for foraging. Trail marker. Char cloth substrate for fire starting. Cleaning rag for optics. Face covering against wind and sand. Cordage when torn into strips. Patch material for larger textile repairs. Cold compress when soaked in water. Hot compress when heated near a fire. Lashing material for improvised shelters. Weapon cleaning patch. Identification marker in team operations. 23 uses. 75 cents. The 6th item surprised Raccoon Survival, not because of what it is, but because of how much the military spends on it relative to everything else on this list. Safety pins. Assorted sizes. A pack of 50 for $1.18. NSN 7310-00-225-8407. They are procured in quantities that dwarf every other item on this list. Tens of thousands per order, and the reason becomes clear when you understand what a safety pin actually is in a survival context. It is a fastener, a clasp, a needle in an emergency, a fishhook, a splint pin, a zipper replacement, a gear attachment point, a trigger mechanism for improvised snares, a means of securing bandages when medical tape is unavailable. Corporal Elijah Tanner used 4 safety pins to reattach a boot sole to its upper after the adhesive failed during a river crossing in 2016. The repair lasted 11 days and 47 miles. The boot was a $200 tactical boot. The repair cost 9 cents. 4 pins from a $1.18 pack of 50. Chief Warrant Officer Patricia Dawson carried a strip of 12 safety pins attached to the inside of her patrol cap for her entire career. 22 years. She told Raccoon Survival she used them more often than her sidearm. Not figuratively, literally. She counted 41 documented uses of safety pins in the field versus 4 instances of drawing her weapon. 41 to 4. The 7th item is one that Raccoon Survival almost did not include because it seems too obvious, but the procurement data demanded it, and the gap between civilian perception and military reality justified its place on the list. Strike Anywhere matches, specifically the Diamond brand green tip variety. 250 matches for $1.57. NSN 9920-01-113-4728. The civilian survival market has spent 20 years convincing people that matches are obsolete, that ferrocerium rods are superior because they work when wet and last for thousands of strikes, that waterproof matches in a sealed container are the minimum acceptable fire-starting tool, that anything less is amateur. The military procurement lists disagree. Strike Anywhere matches appear on more survival kit lists than any fire-starting tool except flint steel. The reason is not romantic. It is mathematical. A ferrocerium rod requires technique. It requires practice. Under stress, with cold hands, in wind. The fine motor skills required to scrape a ferro rod at the correct angle and pressure degrade by approximately 40%. That number comes from a study conducted at the Army Research Laboratory in 2012. Report ARL-TR-6-0-4-1. Cold Stress Motor Skill Degradation Assessment. A match requires one motion. Strike. Done. No technique, no training, no practice. The match does not care about your stress level. It does not care about your fine motor skills. You drag it across a rough surface and it lights. Every time. The waterproofing objection is addressed by item number 1 on this list. Electrical tape. 3 wraps around a bundle of 20 matches renders them waterproof. A single roll of tape waterproofs every match in a 250-count box with tape to spare. Master Sergeant Robert Caldwell taught survival skills at the JFK Special Warfare Center for 9 years. He told Raccoon Survival that he started every class the same way. He put a ferrocerium rod and a box of Strike Anywhere matches on a table. He asked the students which one they would rather have if they could only pick one. Every single class, every student picked the ferro rod. Then he asked them to start a fire with each. The ferro rod took an average of 4 attempts. The match took 1. He said the lesson was about ego. People want to feel like survivalists. Professionals want to start a fire. $1.57. The 8th item is the one that generated the most resistance when Raccoon Survival presented this research to civilian preppers. Because this item exists in every home in America, costs almost nothing, and has been sitting in plain sight for so long that nobody considers it a survival tool. Ziploc bags, gallon size, 15 count, $1.28. NSN 8105-00-837-1859. Quart size appears separately, 20 count, $1.14. Different NSN. Same procurement frequency. The military uses them for everything, and that word is not hyperbole. Raccoon Survival compiled a cross-reference list from field reports, training manuals, and interviews with 17 active and retired service members. 61 documented uses. Waterproofing documents, maps, and electronics. Organizing small items in a kit. Carrying water when no canteen is available. A gallon Ziploc holds exactly 1 gallon. It is, in the most literal sense, a collapsible canteen that weighs nothing. Foraging collection. Medical waste isolation. Wound irrigation when filled with purified water and a corner is cut. Ice pack when filled with cold water. Pillow when filled with air and sealed. Fire starter when filled with water and used as a magnifying lens. That last one was confirmed by Staff Sergeant Webb, the water purification specialist. He demonstrated it during an interview. A Ziploc bag filled with water, held at the correct angle to sunlight, focused a beam onto a char cloth and started a fire in under 90 seconds. A collapsible water container, a fire-starting lens, and 60 other things. $1.28. The ninth item is where the list enters territory that most civilians have never considered. Because this item has no obvious survival application, it is not in any kit, on any shelf, in any store, and yet it appears on NSN procurement lists with a frequency that initially confused Raccoon Survival. Petroleum jelly, standard Vaseline, 3.75-ounce container, $1.47, NSN 6505-00-159-7537. The primary application is fire starting. A cotton ball coated in petroleum jelly burns for approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes of sustained flame from a material that costs less than a penny per application. Compare that to commercial fire-starting tablets that cost roughly 50 cents each and burn for 2 to 3 minutes. The math does not require commentary, but the secondary applications are what justify the NSN. Petroleum jelly prevents blisters when applied to friction points on the feet before a march. It protects skin from windburn and frostbite by creating a moisture barrier. It lubricates knife pivots, zipper tracks, and any mechanism that binds in cold or sandy conditions. It seals small cuts and abrasions when no medical adhesive is available. It protects metal from rust. Lieutenant Colonel David Yamamoto, retired, carried a small container of Vaseline on every deployment for 19 years. He told Raccoon Survival it was the only item he never changed, never upgraded, and never questioned. He used the same brand, the same size, the same container. He said that in survival, the most dangerous impulse is the desire to optimize, the desire to find something better, because better is the enemy of reliable, and reliable is the only thing that matters when the temperature is dropping and your hands are shaking, and the only thing between you and a fire is whatever you have in your pocket. $1.47, available at every pharmacy, every grocery store, every gas station in America. The 10th item on this list is the one that ties the previous 9 together, because without this item, the other 9 are loose components. With it, they become a system. A small notebook and a short pencil. Standard composition. 70-page count. 50 cents at discount retailers. NSN 7530-00-222-3525. The pencil is a standard number 2, 3.5 inches. Sharpened. NSN 7510-00-281-5710. The notebook is not for journaling. It is not for morale. It is for operational documentation, and its survival function is more critical than most people realize. Water purification logs. When you treat water with bleach, you need to track time, dosage, and source. Getting that wrong means getting sick. A written log removes guesswork. Navigation notes, bearing, distance, landmark, time. Without a written record, navigational errors compound. Every experienced land navigator writes it down because memory under stress is unreliable. Inventory management. What do you have, how much of it, and how fast are you consuming it? This is the information that determines whether you make it to rescue or whether you run out of something critical on day 4. Medical notes. What happened, when, what was administered, how the patient responded. In a multi-day survival scenario with injuries, a written medical log can save a life when the rescuers arrive and need to know what was done. Signal messages. If you need to leave a location and want rescuers to know where you went, a note pinned to a tree with a safety pin from item 6 beats any other method. Pencil, not pen. Pens freeze, pens leak, pens dry out. Pens do not write on wet paper. A pencil writes in any temperature, on any surface, wet or dry, upside down, in the dark, by feel. The graphite does not care. Colonel James Hadley, retired, told Raccoon Survival that the most critical piece of survival equipment is not a knife. It is not a fire starter. It is not water purification. It is information management. Because in a survival scenario, you are making decisions with limited information under stress, and the quality of those decisions determines whether you live or die. A notebook and pencil turn chaos into data, data into decisions, decisions into survival. 50 cents and 12 cents, 62 cents total. The 11th and final item on the list is also the most controversial, because this item is the one that the survival industry has spent the most money trying to replace, the one surrounded by the most marketing, the most branding, the most quote, zero repackaging. And the military procurement lists say the replacement was never necessary. A standard cotton handkerchief, white, 18 inches by 18 inches, $1.20 at retail. NSN 8315-00-266-9835. The difference between item 5, the bandana, and item 11, the handkerchief, is material weight and weave. The bandana is a utility textile. It is used for rough tasks, construction, filtration, binding. The handkerchief is a medical and hygiene textile. It is used for wound care, facial protection, and any application where a finer weave matters. The survival industry replaced the handkerchief with Shimarg scarves at $22, tactical neck gaiters at $18, and microfiber multi-tools at $15. None of these appear on the NSN procurement lists for basic survival kits. The cotton handkerchief does. Sergeant Major Caroline Fisher carried 3 white cotton handkerchiefs folded flat inside a Ziploc bag for her entire 26-year career. She used them as compression bandages, as face masks in dust storms, as pre-filters for water, as cooling wraps soaked in water, as slings, as blindfolds for patients with eye injuries, as padding inside helmets, and as signal flags. She told Raccoon Survival that when she retired, the only equipment she kept was the handkerchiefs. Not her boots, not her knife, not her optics. The handkerchiefs. Because everything else could be replaced. The handkerchiefs did not need to be replaced. They were still working after 26 years. $1.20. That is the list. 11 items. Raccoon Survival has spent 7 years compiling it, verifying it, cross-referencing it against procurement records, field reports, and interviews with 43 active and retired service members across 5 branches. The total cost at retail, at Walmart specifically, as of the last price check. 40 case with a MOLLE-compatible exterior. It weighed 4.7 pounds. The flashlight required 2 CR123A batteries. The compass had a liquid-filled housing with a bubble that appeared within the first week. The tactical pen broke on the 3rd use. The multi-tool's pliers jammed after exposure to sand. The ferro rod worked, but only after 9 strikes. The poncho had a seam that leaked. The paracord was rated to 550, but tested at 320. The knife was sharp out of the box and dull after cutting 6 inches of cordage. Total cost, $149. Functional items after 1 week of field testing, 4 out of 10. The folding knife, the whistle, the first aid pouch, and the poncho, if you ignored the leaking seam. The $299 kit was worse. More items, more failure points, more weight. It included a solar charger that required 6 hours of direct sunlight to charge a phone to 30%. A water filter straw that clogged after 14 uses. a fire piston that no one on the Raccoon Survival team could reliably ignite after 40 attempts, a hatchet with a handle that loosened after chopping 4 inches of soft wood, a signal mirror with no sighting hole, an emergency radio that received 3 stations, none of which broadcast emergency information. Total cost, $299. Weight, 7.8 pounds. Functional items after 1 week, 3. The signal mirror, the hatchet if you retightened the handle after every use, and the radio if you were within range of a station that happened to be broadcasting. The $489 kit was the most impressive looking and the least functional. Raccoon Survival will not name the brand, but it is a brand that appears in the sponsored section of almost every major survival channel on YouTube. The kit arrived in a hard case with custom foam inserts. Every item had its own slot. The branding was immaculate. The unboxing experience was designed to make you feel prepared. It contained a fixed-blade knife with a 4-inch blade and a Kydex sheath, a ferrocerium rod with a wooden handle, a titanium spork, a set of waterproof matches in a sealed aluminium tube, a headlamp with 5 modes, a first aid kit with 16 items, a water purification straw, a Mylar emergency blanket, a folding saw, a 50-foot length of paracord, a carabiner, a fishing kit, a sewing kit, a compass, and a laminated survival card with instructions for building a shelter, starting a fire, and signaling for rescue. The knife was excellent. The ferro rod worked. The matches were waterproof. The headlamp was bright. The first aid kit was adequate. Those 5 items justified roughly $60 to $80 of the $489 price tag. The titanium spork was a spork. The Mylar blanket tore on the first use. The folding saw cut through a 2-inch branch in 11 minutes. The paracord tested at 410, not 550. The carabiner was not rated for climbing, which the packaging did not mention. The fishing kit contained hooks too large for any freshwater fish under 3 pounds. The sewing kit was identical to the one available at dollar stores, repackaged in a branded pouch. The compass was functional, but no better than a $5 orienteering compass from Walmart. The survival card was laminated nicely, but contained information available in any basic field manual. And here is the detail that summarized the entire investigation. The sewing kit inside the $489 kit was manufactured by the same company that makes the dollar store version. Same needles, same thread, same buttons, same folding scissors. The only difference was the pouch. The dollar store kit comes in a clear plastic case. The $489 kit version comes in a branded nylon pouch with a drawstring. Same kit, different package. $1.12 versus $489 for the complete set. This is what the survival industry does. It takes items that cost pennies and wraps them in fear, branding, and the promise of readiness. It tells you that preparation requires investment, that the more you spend, the safer you become. That the gap between survival and death is measured in dollars. The military knows better. The military has been testing survival equipment in real conditions, with real consequences, for over a century. And the conclusion, documented across thousands of procurement records and field reports and after-action reviews, is consistent. Simplicity survives, complexity fails. The 11 items on this list have one thing in common. They have no moving parts. They require no batteries. They need no maintenance. They work in any temperature, at any altitude, in any humidity, on any continent. They do not expire. They do not break. They do not require training. And they cost $47.19. Captain Samuel Reed knew this. He did not learn it from a YouTube video or a survival blog or a prepper forum. He learned it from 4 deployments and 11 weeks of training designed to simulate the worst conditions a human being can face. And when he packed his personal kit, the one he trusted with his life, he picked up a sewing kit and a roll of electrical tape. Reed is still alive. The knife would not have mattered. Raccoon Survival does not tell anyone what to buy. That is not the mission of this channel. The mission is to show what the data says, and the data, in this case, says that the most effective survival kit in the world costs less than a dinner for two. What you do with that information is your decision. But gear is only half the equation. The other half is location. Where you are when the situation begins determines more than what you are carrying. And some of the locations that people consider safest, the places they plan to go when everything falls apart, are the places most likely to get them killed. That is the next video. Raccoon Survival has identified 7 locations that preppers consistently rank as safe havens. Every single one of them has a fatal flaw that the data makes obvious and the marketing makes invisible. 7 safe locations, 7 death traps. That is next.